We have seen much truth and many deeply touching scenes of reconciliation between victims, survivors, and perpetrators the last 22 months. But as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission winds up its work, we now have to look to the future and ask, what is to become of reconciliation? How do we take this process further? Perhaps we should first ask, why are we talking about reconciliation? Doesn't the R-E, the re in reconciliation, imply that we bring people together who were once at peace? That is certainly not true of our society. We have been divided for more than 300 years. Should people not be conciled before they can be reconciled? Tonight we introduce you to the concept of conciliation.
My name is Oltatanda. I come from Eastern Cape, and then I'm a member of ABLA, and then I get instruction from the High Command of ABLA. I'm not killing your daughter because it's my decision, but I'm saying sorry.
Bulele, Baba 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 Bulele.
Now, being concerned means that you were in line with each other, which means we are on the same wavelength, and that had broken down. Now, in our memory, all of us, you and me, we don't remember such a situation because we're always at odds with each other. There was oppression, there was the oppressed, and that is not being in line with each other.
We actually are talking about creating something that never was in this country.
Conciliation, as far as I'm concerned, will mean that you have to take away the anger and the animosity in people and make them understand the need to stay and work together.
In 1995, South Africa reaches out emotionally to the concept of a rainbow nation. This moment is imprinted on our psyche as a time in which one nation became a possibility. But today we have to ask, is the rainbow nation a mirage? Did it exist? Can it exist? And if it does, is it over?
There is no way that you can take away the rainbow aspect of our nation. It's there, it's permanent. It's just that it has to be cemented further by ensuring that there's parity between people in terms of conditions of their lives, conditions at work, at school, at their residences. We should do away with poverty. And in that way, I think that this rainbow nation will mean something to all people.
I believe that we have now created conditions, the most ideal conditions ever in the history of the country, for black and white South Africans. And when I say black, I include Indian and colored communities as well. I include everybody. I think we have created the most ideal conditions for the first time for all of us to be both conciled and reconciled.
I don't believe that there was, in fact, a phase of rainbow harmony. I think there was an imagined rainbow. There was an imagined harmony. It was, in fact, I think, more correctly to label it as a period of relief, that things didn't turn out as badly as they could have, but also a period during which we celebrated an achievement, a major achievement.
At the moment, it's Rainbow Nation, one nation, everything together, and we're going to create this paradise in a certain sense. And I'm sad to say, but we're going to have a lot of disillusionment, as some of these things will just not work. And then hopefully the pendulum will come back, and it will become more realistic and addressing our diversity, acknowledging that we've got a diversity, and then trying to reconcile that.
It is a recipe for disaster. I don't know who this fool is that brought about this concept of Rainbow Nation. He must lack vision, or she must lack vision, whoever he is who brought this rainbow, what's called concept to this country. They are planting again what we have eliminated. We have eliminated apartheid. Now they're bringing it back now in elevated and glorified ways. So Rainbow is out. Rainbow Nation is out. But what is in is an African nation. We can be an African nation. And the only thing that we need to do is to become committed to Africa. That's all. That's all it takes.
The PAC's way forward might be Africanism. But what exactly does this mean? And what else lies in the pot at the end of the rainbow? How are we going to reconcile ourselves with the past in order to live in the future?
Now, so many things have been taken away from the oppressed people. Number one, land. It was just taken away, and they became landless. Their stock was taken away, and all their possessions were taken away. Even their self-respect was taken away. So those people, therefore, that took that away, they don't exist anymore. Now, you cannot blame all the white people in this country for that and say they did it, because they didn't do it. I mean, most of them didn't do it knowingly at the time. But there is something, responsibility. They all have the responsibility. They may not have done it, but they have the responsibility. So they must carry out that responsibility of restitution. And they must acknowledge that. To say, I'm sorry, and I apologize, and that is it, that's the end of it, let us forget. That is not enough.
There is no way in which you can reconcile and reconcile people if you keep them apart from each other. I think for people to come to know each other, they must live together. There is a dramatic example, I think, in the history of this country. When Moshoeshoe I, during the beginning of the 19th century, forged the Basotho as a tribal unit, if you like, he pulled together Basotho, Fengus, Chwana, whatever group of people he found, he pulled all of them together. And in a real sense, in doing that, Basotho prized peace. And they prized it because it came from the origins of the tribe, making peace with each other. You may be Nguni, but let's live together, let's find a common basis, and let's become one people. And I think that is what we are trying to do in this country today, creating conditions in which South Africans can interact with each other, can learn each other, languages and customs, go to school together, play together. Unless that was so, I don't see how we could reconcile the people of the country.
The conflict of the past is not only about white oppressors. When we talk of reconciliation, there are so many shades of the past that now have become levels for reconciliation. What about black informers, black policemen, black councillors, black collaborators? What about the ongoing strife between the ANC and the IFP? And in a country where the difference between rich and poor is so vast, what about conciliation between rich and poor people?
There are people that were tortured and tormented by the SBs or by the security system. And we are not of equal strength. We've got to recognize that. So they broke down and sold out. and actually went ahead and gave evidence in court. Now, you look at their motives. Did they join the liberation struggle or the liberation movement in order to sell out? The answer is no. Therefore, you cannot therefore isolate them. You've got to embrace them and say, well, you were weak, but we can strengthen you now. We have achieved what you wanted to achieve in the first place, but you fell by the wayside.
If you look into some of the areas, you will see how that the old order tried to encourage division, between the Ciskei and the Transkei. This is one if you like, tribe. Everybody speaking Xhosa. And yet the old order divided these people. And we must now find a way to reconcile and reconcile those people.
There will be no sustainable reconciliation unless there is attention paid meticulously, vigorously, urgently to issues of socio-economic deprivation.
We need to address the poverty that is gripping the people, all of us together at this point in time. And then I think conciliation, reconciliation, rainbow nation will mean something to the majority of the people of this country.
As the life of the Truth Commission comes to an end, we have to ask ourselves what role its activities have played in reconciling our nation. Throughout this program, you have seen amazing moments at hearings where people reached out to each other, forgave each other, embraced each other. Moments of conciliation. But so many people who have appeared before the Commission have said that simply telling their stories to a nation whose time it was to listen was a healing process that brought peace. And maybe this lies at the root of the concept we are trying to explore, conciliation, meaning not only reconciling ourselves with others, but reconciling ourselves with the past and our role in it, as victims, as survivors, as perpetrators, as politicians, or maybe simply as people who did nothing more than just benefit from apartheid.
This reconciliation is not about hearing that my child was killed here and so on, and then say, well, I'm sorry and I forgive you, and that is it. It is for families, it is for communities. Gradually, as they move on in life, find capacity on a daily basis to overcome the traumas. And so even forgiveness cannot be legislated for. Some of the people, of course, will go to their graves without the fortune of being able to master that and being able to forgive.
If it's that simple, that truth will automatically bring reconciliation. And the further we've gone, I'm not so sure about that anymore. And I know it's a very harsh thing to say, because after 2 years, I think we're further apart and not closer to each other because of the process.
It goes to the very heart of making peace with the past, making peace with ourselves, and making peace with the fact that both perpetrators and victims played a part in shaping the history.
They've been opening up all these wounds, taking off, scratching, cutting open, bleeding, bleeding, bleeding. And in the end of the day, who's going to stitch it up again? Who's going to close it down?
Many white people have embraced the Truth Commission as a way of coming to terms with the past. But so many more white people in general, and Afrikaners in particular, have been openly hostile and critical towards the Truth Commission. One only has to read the report on Sundays to realize how deep this resentment lies amongst Afrikaners. Now, many South Africans can probably not understand this resentment. Resentment towards a body that not only stretches out a hand to victims, but also to perpetrators, of whom many are Afrikaners. This resentment is an obvious hurdle to reconciliation and conciliation. Many people say that this hostility is a way of hiding guilt and shame. And if this is true, how do we deal with white guilt?
Ons moet aanvaar dat ons waarskynlik deur die proses nou geforseer is. Maar ons kan nie vir ewig so aanhou deur oop te maak en wonde oop te maak en nie uiteindelik toe te maak nie. Dit gaan nie werk nie. Ons is deur dit in die Anglo-Boereoorlog. Onthou daar's 25,000 kinders van ons dood en vrouens dood. Ons het nie daai geleentheid gehad nie. Die Engels het net aangegaan. En die dilemma is ons moet iewers begin om dit toe te maak en dit moet ook van albei kante afkom.
And the them and us philosophy will never work for this country. And there has been very, very little reconciliation on the part of white people in this country. They don't want to sacrifice, they don't want to atone, and they shift the blame, they don't want to take responsibility for this. And they're not doing themselves a favor. Maybe they're doing themselves a favor, a selfish favor, but they're not doing a favor to their children.
I think that the Afrikaner people should not therefore feel guilty. They should not feel bad. They should begin to take the hand of those that are saying we should reconcile, we should concile.
Well, for a person to be guilty of a crime, there must be intent. And we cannot therefore say citizens who had no intention to set up flag blasts and kill people, that they should carry the burden of this. We cannot hold responsible ordinary, shunters, farmers, and so on, who supported apartheid because they were made to believe and they were convinced that this is the best way to run affairs.
They must choose whether they are Africans or still Europeans. And it takes a lot of courage to make that choice. It takes a lot of courage because you are saying, I'm no longer European. And I'm saying that to Indians as well. Those people who continue to call themselves Indians in Africa. If they want to stay in Africa, they must stop calling themselves Indians because you only find Indians in India and Chinese in China.
We're part of Africa, we're committed to Africa. We've got no other home